I'm Hurley. I travel the Ozarks to visit people, oddities, attractions, and anything else I find interesting. Why? Because it's my show.
I never really cared that much about this kind of stuff until I married Heather, and she liked to go to auctions. So that was one of the reasons that I got interested in, and I just went to auctions with her, and then I started discovering things that were interesting to me. And she got her stuff, I got my stuff, and then I started studying up on the different areas of history. I'm a history buff anyway, so. But I'm a finder rather than a collector. You know, I just like to find stuff, absorb it, assimilate what I can from it, and then take it and try to get it a new home.
Hey, man on the left, man on the right, man, it's a matter of the middle. Take a good look, take a side step, make your brain up to the riddle. All of your mind, both of your ears, take a hard listen to the rebel. Rebel, 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 revolution.
Back in the 80s, to make money, you know, to make a living, you know, when you're newly married and got 3 kids and trying to keep the wolves away, you know, and there was a Mountain Home had a lot, and still does have a lot of retired people, so there's a lot of older vintage antique type stuff that was available. And I would, in the landscaping business, I discovered through working for retired people, I saw things and they go, well, do you want that? There's not really room here at our home that we've moved to for this. Would you like to buy that? And I would trade them landscape work and stuff. And little by little, I began to develop an eye for what was unusual and interesting in terms of collectability. And I developed quite a cache of stuff just accidentally, and no place to really display it or sell it or move it or take it. And a friend of mine told me about a flea market in Memphis that was every month at the fairgrounds in Memphis, and it's a big deal. It was a big deal. It's not even at the fairgrounds anymore, but it was one of those places that you could go and throw your stuff out on the table, and then thousands of people would come along, and you could, you know, see what happens. And it's a learning curve. It was definitely a learning curve. I mean, books could tell you so much, but it couldn't tell you what people were really looking for. But I was able to develop an eye over the years that allowed me to expand on what was interesting to people. And I found out that what was interesting to me in some ways was also interesting to the general public, to strangers. Because your family's going to go, oh yeah, that's neat, Dad's got that, oh that's nice, you know, Dad does this, or my husband's into, you know, but you don't really know until you throw it out and see what sticks on the wall, basically. You know, you throw it out to the public, and if the public likes what you have found, then you become connected to it, and you end up being somebody that they look for on a monthly basis. And that's how I kind of got hooked into the flea market at the fairgrounds over there. And then I discovered that there was also another flea market in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on a different weekend. There was a skip between the weekends. It was the first weekend in Tulsa and the third weekend in Memphis. So I was able to shop on my way to the Memphis show and sell. And now I was buying for 2 different clients, because oddly enough, Memphis, Tennessee wanted things that Tulsa could care less about. And Mountain Home is located between the two, almost the same distance, 200 miles one way and the other. And I could buy at the Tulsa flea market cheaply on some things that they were just trying to get rid of, and that's what they were looking for in Memphis, and vice versa. So that became like, well, this may actually be a doable line of work for me.
Floating in the sky, wondering why, shooting down electrical lightning, and up from above, with God's of love, telling me that life ain't simple. They're telling me, son, walk on run. You got a whole lot of loving going on. Yeah, yeah. You got a whole lot of loving going on.
eBay came on, you're right, eBay was a game changer to everyone that was in my line of work. A friend of mine who was in the antique business is the one that brought it up to me. He goes, there's this thing called eBay you should look into, and I looked into it. Now keep in mind, I'd never even owned a computer. I'd never done any computer at all. This was 1997, early 97, and eBay had just gotten started in 96, in the fall or so of 96. And I went ahead and bit the bullet and bought a computer. I spent $1,200 on my first, whatever it was, a Dell, I don't remember what it was, and taught with the help of a good friend of mine. We walked through it and figured out how to do it. And back in the day, you would actually call eBay and ask them things on how to do stuff. And I talked to the guy that started eBay. I'd been on the phone with him and asking him, now how do I load the pictures? Because it was extremely difficult to make it happen. Everything was HTML and you were working with everything to get a picture on and all. But they quickly fixed that or, made it easier. But at the very beginning, it was pretty difficult to do. We were selling, action figures. We were selling toys. We were selling pocket knives, fountain pens, anything we could find we would put on eBay, and it was such a green virgin territory that people, there was an enormous amount of interest in what people were selling, and I think at the very beginning people thought it was must be rare and unusual, so I'm going to bid against it. And they like the concept of bidding, the auction, and so you can get good money for stuff. It's not like that today. It's a lot more it's a lot different today. But back in the day when the Blair Witch Project came out, I had this crazy idea because there's a lot of alone time. It's a very lonely, singular type business. It's you and the computer and your stuff, and I got this crazy idea. I always used a blue fabric to put my items in front of on the eBay, and I would mount whatever it was and take pictures of it with the same blue background. And one day I just got a crazy idea and took a picture of just the blue fabric. And all I had was nothing but a picture of the blue fabric. So I decided to list the Blair Witch entity action figure for sale. And I put a little eBay card that they sent us back in the day. They gave us a little TP that said, eBay seller on it, and I put that in the picture. And it actually, a friend of mine told me, I never saw it, but a friend of mine told me that it was on like 60 Minutes. There was a picture of that picture on 60 Minutes that eBay is just so nuts. It's going nuts. Look, somebody was selling an action figure of the entity of Blair Witch, which of course you never saw the entity, right? So it was a picture of nothing, and didn't get any bids. But I did see another thing at the beginning where a guy put mint in box, and he actually had a little mint in a box and got $900 for it. A dinner mint in a box, because that was important if you had something that was a mint in box. But anyway, the early days of eBay was extremely interesting. You reached out. It changed the world if you were in the buying and selling of collectibles and antiques, because it opened you literally to everyone in the country at the time. It wasn't so worldwide at that time, but we were selling to people in California and New York and Florida and all people, and it's a real, you felt like you were involved in a community. People were talking to one another about how to do stuff and how exciting this is, and people quitting their jobs to do it and everything. Of course, this was during the .com explosion too, so lots of things were launched off of the whole concept. But it was a lot of fun getting involved in eBay as early as I did, and learning how to operate a computer. Goodness, for an old man, wow, that was tough, but we made it. I think what happened in terms of how vinyl has grown and become so interesting, we started selling vinyl here at Flashbacks when we first opened 13 years ago. We celebrated our 13th anniversary on July 1st, incidentally. And about 12 and a half years ago, somebody came in the store, asked me if I would be interested in records. And it was a retired person. And I said, well, look at him. I can't imagine anybody would be interested. This was 2003. Okay, the retro vintage phase or fad or whatever you want to call it was actually coming along nicely. People were wanting to wear bell bottoms. 1999 was the 30th anniversary of Woodstock. And I think that had a lot to do with it. And by 2003, it had come to Mountain Home. It had made it to the woods, made it out to the Ozarks. And what happened? And I went, they don't want much money for all of these records. I think I'll try it. So I went ahead and bought these boxes of records. It was probably 300 or 400 records. And I put a little card table up and put a sign up and said, so much a piece for these records and all. And nothing really happened for a while. And then they started to be interesting to people. And so I went online and wondered. And first place I went, of course, is I was familiar with eBay. So I went and looked, and sure enough, there was people selling vinyl on eBay. Not a lot at the time, but there was definitely more rarities, more harder to find items. And I went, well, I'll be darned. And the next thing I knew, somebody come in the store, saw I had a table of records, asked me if I bought records, and I went, I guess I do. And they brought me records, and it's just, now we've got probably close to 30,000 records, and we go through and grade them and listen to them. I think what's happened is the young people, we're seeing people from any age group. I'm seeing young kids liking vinyl. And the parents, in some cases, are not, they're bewildered why their 12-year-old is interested in collecting vinyl. And so they don't know where the influence came from. So it must be some kind of a sociological thing. Maybe the internet is helping it push along. But I think in many cases, the people that are looking at vinyl, particularly the younger people, 20 to 35, say, are looking at it more as I call it a time capsule, because not only is analog vinyl have a different sound to it, according, and I'm not an expert about sound, but they say that it has there's so much more to a record than a digital reproduction of that record. And nowadays, of course, they're making new vinyl, but the old vinyl brings with it a story. It brings with it a time capsule of a period. Like if you buy Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, an original copy or a fairly recent copy from that period, like say from the early 70s of Dark Side of the Moon, you're actually hearing the band when they were young and creative and excited and into it, and instead of today when you hear oh gee, Pink Floyd's on tour, I don't want to go see old bands. I don't want to go see a band. I want to remember them when they were at their peak and when they were creating. And I think that's what vinyl does to the young people. It is a true. I mean, there's a pair of bell bottoms you can get. Okay, that's nice, and that brings you back mentally. A warm, fuzzy feeling. Mom or grandma or something wore that, and it makes you feel good in a simpler time. But I think vinyl actually speaks to your imagination. stereos, for example. Everybody wants the stereos from the 70s. Okay? Stereo systems from the 70s, you know, phonograph, stereo receivers, amplifiers, that sort of thing, speakers and all. They want the Pioneer, the Sansui, the Marantz, they want the, you know, JVCs, they want the Klipsch, they want Bose, they want the stuff that was made back then because they've been told it was better, it sounds better. The fact that it's still around 40 years, 45 years later tells you something right there. It was expensive in the time, so people that bought it had a tendency to take better care of it. So that's one of the reasons it lasted so long. But the main reason is because it was made better. Now, you look at that and you go, well, why was it made better then? Why can't they do it now? Or why don't they do it now? Well, they do it now. But it's for the elite. If you want a really good turntable, pay $3,000 for one now. You know, and up. You know, it starts in there. Okay. Part of the reason it was so well made and so important was because it was a giant industry back then. You got to remember, you really have to look back at Elvis and the 50s and the 60s and what music and rock and roll and that sort of genre was doing. It was in its childhood in the 50s and 60s. It really hit adulthood in the 70s. And Marantz and the Japanese companies, the Sansuis and the Japanese companies saw it. And it really comes down to capitalism. It really does. They started going, this is a big market. Let's make good stuff, get good money for it. And they did. And people were more discriminating by then. All of a sudden you had the guys that were interested in the Bob Dylans and stuff of the early 60s, but the stereos were kind of, you know, you could get a good one, but they weren't like they were in the 70s. And what happened is those people that, when they were teenagers listening to that music, the Peter, Paul and Mary and the Simon and Garfunkels and stuff like that, they got a job. They became professionals. All of a sudden they had some disposable income. Now, a couple $1,000s for a Marantz system is something that they felt like they deserved. And music was a giant part of their life at that time. They listened to music all the time. There was great music being produced. There was music that was on purpose being produced for those guys, for those people. It was speaking to a war, Vietnam War. It was speaking, the music was a major part of our life, like it is today, but at that point we had records. We had vinyl. So you had to have equipment that would do the music justice. You had to have equipment that was quality enough to take you there on that journey, on that trip that you were going to go on when you sat down and listened. I tell people about our store, I buy these items one piece at a time, whether it be jewelry, records, clothing, whatever it is, I'm buying it one item at a time. I'm looking at each piece and making a decision, a qualitative decision about that item, learning histories and learning sources of a retro, vintage, or even an antique item, be it a watch or a fountain pen, a pocket knife, a piece of decor, artwork, that sort of thing. We claim, you know, we one of our taglines on our brochures is that we specialize in retro items for the home and the person. That's the way we put it. And so I'm involved in furniture and all that, and I can't know everything. I can't comprehend everything. There are most definitely items and pieces that float to the top. The cream will come to the top, and everybody knows, the mid-century art modern Ames furniture, and everyone knows what a really good watch is, by name and all like that. And there's places that you can research that sort of thing. But most of my information and my knowledge I've picked up from experience through customers who are deeply focused on a particular subject or a particular genre that they're just big on, nerds on. They're just nerdy about it. And they do all the studying. Well, when they come in, boy, do I pick their brain if I have an item that I know that they're interested in. And they're very quick. People who are deep collectors, and a lot of them are professional people, and this is a hobby. This is something that they don't do for a living. They just do it because it's something that fascinates them, and they are very much into. They will study, and they will look at the books, and they will spend the time that it takes to become an expert on an item. And those people are usually pretty charitable with their information. I never know what's going to come through the front door, and probably close to 90% of my merchandise comes through that front door now. I don't go out shopping so much anymore because these places, a place like this, after so many years, develops a gravitational pull. It has its own gravity, and people come in that like it, and they go, oh. And I can't tell you, every single day people ask me, where do you get your stuff? Do you buy? They do. They ask, those are the words. They go, do you buy this? I'm going, well, we have elves that make it. And I'm like, of course we buy it. We buy this. And oh, well, I've got an aunt who is moving into a nursing home, and and that's kind of how all that rolls on itself. It begins to, like I said, creates its own gravitational pull, and we just kind of look at what's coming through the door, and if we think it's interesting and cool, and my customers would appreciate it, I try to help it find a new home, a new generation. It has a lot to do with the appeal of a place like this, is that it's touchable, it's tangible, visceral, in terms of I can touch something that was from 1974, and the history of it, and what's good and what isn't good, and all. But art is art, and I think a lot of the young people that come in are attracted to things because of their form, the lines that they see, and maybe could care less if it's old or not, even, or what the history of that was, or who was it that designed it. And maybe seeing something that interests them will spark their interest and give them a history lesson before it's all over. If they purchase something and take it home, maybe they'll delve into it further and learn more and expand their own horizons on a particular item. But I think that's one of the things that keeps me interested in this. I have probably ADHD, I think you have to, because in this business, because everything changes so quickly in styles and fashions and all, that when you're dealing in something like for example, when we first started 13 years ago, most of my merchandise was from the 60s, my clothing and stuff was 60s, 70s, and it wasn't long before, hey, 80s was vintage. 90s is vintage now. We have kids come in here now that are regular customers that were born in 2000. So anything from the 90s is old to them because it was from the previous generation. I think if you look at what collectability or interest in previous items or previous styles or previous fashion, because when it really boils down to, you're really looking at that. You're looking at fashion and style. That's what's appealing to people, is style, okay, with a capital S. Okay, a piece of furniture. I mean, I have a bar back here that's from the 60s. And I know that because I know the history of the bar, but I also know it because I know the style of the bar. I know it's not a reproduced style from the 60s because I know the history of that bar. And that I think is why mankind, let's put it that way, throughout history has always collected and tried to seek something that had a style, because they're looking at something that a person, that a mentality created, imagined. Look at like Michelangelo's stuff. Okay? I mean, what was it? What did they think of him then? What did his contemporaries think of him? What did his neighbor think of him? You know, that's all you always wonder. And I think that, like you were saying, the 80s at the time seemed to produce a lot of plastic. The 80s and 90s was a lot of plastic, cheap throwaway, like, well, this is a fad and I'm going to toss this. Looking back upon it, it was actually better made than we thought, comparatively speaking. You know, because now it seems like things are truly not made well. In the future, the good stuff, and like we've always said in the antique business, which I've been doing antiques, buying and selling antiques for many years, the good stuff will always be collectible. There will always be somebody out there that wants the good stuff. You know, the stuff that was quality and thought out and styled, somebody that knew what they were doing. And so in the future, they're going to look back at 2016 and maybe say, now this was good, that was good, this was good, but here we are today going, is there anything good? There's a whole lot to retrospect. Hindsight is 20/20, not to be cliche, but in retrospect, we do have a tendency to be more discerning and more experienced and more wise about the choices that we make. So I think that there's no end to collectability. It's just going to be a little bit harder to find something from this period that's worthy of carrying on for the rest of your life and passing it down to your kids.
Hey, man on the left, man on the right, man, it's a matter of the middle.